My abusive ex chased away every man who got close to me, until I met someone who showed him he couldn't control me anymore. I'm 27F, and I used to believe that once you leave an abusive relationship, the nightmare ends. You change your number, move to a new apartment, block them on every app. And that's supposed to be it, right? You start over. But nobody tells you that sometimes the real nightmare begins after you leave. Because they don't just let go. They make sure you don't move on either. My ex, let's call him John, 30M, was that kind of man. Charming at first, terrifying later. When we met, he was everything I thought I wanted. Confident, protective, always there when I needed him. But over time, I realized his protection was really control in disguise. It started small. Who I talked to, what I wore, who I followed online. He said things like, "I'm just looking out for you," or, "I know how guys think." At first, I thought it was jealousy. Then I learned it was possession. By the time I saw it clearly, I was already too scared to fight back. We were together for 4 years. 4 years of walking on eggshells, apologizing for things I didn't do, and pretending his anger was my fault. Leaving him wasn't easy. It took me months to plan. Saving money, secretly talking to a friend who helped me find a new apartment, waiting for a moment when he wasn't home. I left in the middle of the day with 2 bags and my cat, shaking the whole drive. For a while, I thought I was free. Then the messages started. They weren't direct threats at first, just reminders. "I saw your car near 5th Street. That new job of yours looks fun. You looked beautiful in that blue dress today." Every message was proof that he still knew where I was. Then came the men. Any man who so much as talked to me, a barista, a coworker, even my Uber driver, would end up getting calls, DMs, or worse. Someone keyed my neighbor's car after he helped me carry groceries. Another time, a guy I matched with online texted me, "Hey, I think your ex just threatened to find me. What the hell is wrong with him?" I stopped dating, stopped smiling at strangers, stopped existing outside my apartment. He'd won, and he knew it. Even after I filed a restraining order, nothing really changed. John was smart. He never said anything explicitly threatening to me. It was always to other people. He had a job, a clean record, and enough charm to talk his way out of anything. Everyone told me to move, but I had a good career in Austin, a place I'd built from scratch. Why should I have to disappear because he couldn't handle losing me? So I stayed. I kept to myself. I worked from home. I didn't go out unless absolutely necessary. For months, it was just silence and fear, until one random Thursday afternoon when my laptop died. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but that dead laptop changed everything. I took it to a repair shop near my office, still half panicked about missing deadlines. That's when I met Derek, 29A. He wasn't what I expected. Big guy, maybe 6'4", built like he lived in the gym, but his voice was calm, soft even. He looked at me, not through me. "Don't worry," he said, taking the laptop. "I'll take care of it." He fixed it in less than an hour and refused to charge me for labor. "First-time customer discount," he said with a small grin. I don't know why, but that grin stayed with me. It wasn't flirty. It was kind, and for the first time in years, kindness didn't scare me. But that night, when I pulled into my parking lot, John's car was there. Same black sedan, same dent in the bumper, same man behind the wheel, watching. He didn't get out. He just smiled. And that was when I realized he knew. He always knew. But what I didn't realize then was that this time, things were different. Because soon, I'd meet the one man John couldn't intimidate. And for the first time, the fear would stop being mine. I tried to convince myself that Derek was just another kind stranger, that he was a blip in my otherwise careful, invisible life. But I couldn't stop thinking about him. Not in the way you think. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was something simpler. He made me feel safe, and that was something I hadn't felt in years. A week after the laptop repair, I dropped by the shop again, under the excuse of asking about my warranty. He smiled when he saw me. "Hey, you again. Laptop still working?" I nodded. "Perfectly. I just wanted to thank you again." He shrugged, easygoing as always. "No problem. You'd be surprised how many people panic when their tech dies. You handled it better than most." That made me laugh. A real laugh. Not the small, polite ones I usually faked. And for the first time in years, laughing didn't make me look over my shoulder. We started talking. At first, it was about computers, then books, then life. He mentioned training at a gym not far from where I lived. "I do MMA," he said, almost apologetically. "Not the scary kind, more like discipline and structure. I teach self-defense, too." I froze a little at that word. "Self-defense," he noticed, his tone softening. "Bad history?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I guess you could say that." He didn't pry, just nodded back. Then one day, You'll learn that you don't have to be scared of history. Something about the way he said it hit deeper than I expected. Over the next few weeks, we kept running into each other, the farmer's market, the same coffee shop, even the grocery store once. Each time he was kind, calm, patient. He never asked for my number. He never made me feel like I owed him anything, and that's what made me start to trust him. When I finally did give him my number, it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The first time we went out, I almost canceled twice. I kept imagining John's car in my rearview mirror, his voice in my head. You'll never be free of me. But Derek showed up right on time, wearing a hoodie and that easy smile. Dinner okay? Or would you rather do something low-key? Low-key, I said immediately. He grinned. Good. There's a taco truck that's open late. We ate in his car, windows down, talking about nothing and everything. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't check every shadow. I didn't flinch when headlights passed. But peace never lasts when someone like John is watching. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. You think he's different? You really think some guy with muscles can protect you? You'll always be mine. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard from him in weeks. I thought maybe he'd moved on. I blocked the number. Again. But it didn't matter. Because John didn't need a phone to send a message. 2 days later, Derek texted me first. Hey, weird question. Do you know someone who drives a black sedan? Texas plates ending in 258. My chest tightened. He found him. Why? I typed. Because he's been sitting outside the gym for the past 30 minutes. Just staring. I could barely breathe. That's him, I whispered into the phone when Derek called. He didn't yell. He didn't panic. He just said, okay, stay inside tonight. Don't open the door for anyone. I'll take care of it. That night I didn't sleep. I half expected John to show up at my door, pounding like he always did. But he didn't. The next morning, Derek texted again. He's gone. Haven't seen him since last night. I called immediately. What did you do? Nothing illegal, he said lightly. Just had a conversation. I waited. Derek, he sighed. I told him he needed to leave you alone. That if he wanted to keep showing up around my gym, he was welcome to spar with me instead. I felt a mix of terror and something else. Something dangerously close to relief. You didn't hit him, did you? He chuckled softly. No, I didn't have to. I pictured it then. John's fragile ego crumbling against someone he couldn't intimidate. For once, his anger had nowhere to go. That night, for the first time in years, I slept through the night without waking up to check my locks. But people like John don't disappear quietly. They wait, watching for cracks to crawl back through. And a few weeks later, he found one. It started with a call from my boss. Hey, Madison, weird thing. Someone just emailed me saying you've been sleeping with clients. I blocked it, but maybe change your passwords. My blood ran cold. John wasn't trying to scare me physically anymore. He was trying to ruin me professionally. I wanted to collapse. But when I told Derek, he didn't flinch. He just said, then we fight smarter. The next few weeks felt like walking through smoke. Nothing was clear. Everything smelled like danger. John's presence was everywhere, even when I couldn't see him. It was in the blocked numbers that kept changing. The random friend requests from fake profiles. The nasty rumors whispered around my office. Derek stayed by my side through it all. He didn't try to fix me. He didn't tell me to calm down or that I was overreacting. He just listened. Sometimes that was all I needed. He started coming over after work. Not because I asked him to, but because he wanted to make sure I wasn't alone. He'd cook, we'd talk, sometimes just sit in silence while I worked. The kind of silence that felt safe, not suffocating. Then one night, as I was cleaning up the kitchen, I noticed Derek scrolling through his phone, his expression serious. What's wrong? I asked. He turned the screen toward me. It was a message request, from a burner account. You should be careful who you hang around with. Some people have dangerous pasts. I froze. That's John. I know it's him. Derek nodded. I thought so too. I ran the metadata through a tracker app. Guess where it's from? I swallowed. Where? He met my eyes. Your old apartment complex. That hit like a punch to the gut. John was still in the city. He'd never left. Derek leaned forward. Madison, we need to get real evidence this time. Something that sticks. Like what? I asked bitterly. He's careful. He never says anything directly. Just enough to make me sound paranoid. He shook his head. Then we'll make him slip. He set up security cameras outside my apartment, disguised as porch lights. He installed one in my car too, hidden under the rearview mirror. If he tries to follow you again, we'll catch him. For a while, things went quiet. Too quiet. And that's when I started to think maybe John had finally given up. Then, one Friday night, I came home to find my door slightly open. Everything inside me froze. I called Derek immediately. He told me to stay outside and wait. When he arrived, he went in first. Calm, controlled, like he'd done this before. The apartment was a mess. Drawers open, clothes everywhere, pictures on the floor. Nothing was missing, except one thing. A framed photo of me and Derek from the night we went to the fair. It was gone. He wanted you to know he was here, Derek said quietly. That night, I stayed at his place. I didn't argue when he locked the door behind us. I didn't even argue when he insisted on sleeping on the couch to make me feel comfortable. I just sat there shaking, staring at my hands. He's never going to stop, is he? Derek leaned against the wall, his eyes steady. No, not until someone makes him. The next morning he made some calls. Legal contacts, friends at the gym who worked security, even a private investigator he knew from an old training job. For the first time, it felt like the fight wasn't just mine anymore. Over the next week, we gathered everything. Screenshots, call logs, the emails to my boss, footage from my apartment camera. And then one night we got lucky. Derek's phone buzzed. Motion alert. Someone was at my old place. We watched in real time as John's figure appeared on the screen, trying to remove the camera. But Derek had installed a second one behind a plant. It caught his face, clear as day. He wasn't just lurking. He was breaking and entering. Derek called the police. This time, they couldn't dismiss it as he said, she said. When they arrested John that night, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt empty, like someone had pulled the fear out of me all at once and left nothing but exhaustion behind. Derek stayed with me through the entire process. He came to court when I had to testify. When I started shaking on the stand, he was in the back row, his eyes on mine, steadying me. John tried to glare, tried to intimidate, but the look Derek gave him back was something else. Not anger, not violence, just quiet, unshakable strength. It was over in less than an hour. John was charged with stalking, harassment, and unlawful entry. They set a protective order that actually meant something this time. When we walked out of the courthouse, I finally exhaled. The air felt different, lighter. Derek looked at me and said, "You did it." I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. "No," I said softly. "We did." But even as we drove home, I couldn't shake the thought that John's arrest wasn't the end, just the first real step toward getting my life back. Because surviving wasn't the same as healing, and healing was going to take time. The day after John's arrest, I woke up expecting fear to hit me like it always did. The racing heart, the tight chest, the automatic scan of the room for danger. But instead there was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt earned. I lay there for a long time, staring at the morning light spilling through Derek's curtains, trying to convince myself that I didn't have to run anymore. Derek made breakfast. Eggs, toast, too much coffee. He wasn't trying to play hero, and that's what made it so easy to be around him. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic speeches, just small, consistent things that made me feel human again. Still, the fear didn't vanish overnight. I jumped when someone knocked at the door. I flinched when I saw a car that looked like John's. Derek never made me feel weak for that. He just said, "Healing doesn't happen on a deadline." And he was right. The police told me John would stay in custody until the trial, but I didn't let myself feel safe yet. I started therapy, joined a local survivor support group. For the first few meetings, I barely spoke. I just listened. To women whose stories sounded too much like mine. Some had been free for years and still checked their locks 5 times before bed. That made me realize something. What happened to me wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a larger story, one that far too many people lived through. When Derek picked me up after those meetings, he never asked what we talked about. He just handed me a smoothie or cracked a dumb joke. I didn't know if I was falling in love with him or just learning what safety felt like again. Maybe both. One night, a few months later, we went to one of his MMA matches. I hesitated at first. The noise, the shouting, the crowd. But he promised to stay with me the whole time. Seeing him in that ring was something else. He was focused, grounded, precise. Not angry, just in control. The opposite of John, who used strength to destroy. Derek used it to protect. After the fight, as we walked out into the cool night air, I said quietly, "You're not what I expected." He laughed. "What did you expect? A brute who punches walls for fun?" I smiled. "Something like that." He looked at me for a long moment. "You know, you're stronger than you think, Madison." I shook my head. "I don't feel strong." "Yeah," he said softly. "That's how strength usually feels. Like surviving when you don't think you can." That night, when we got back to my apartment, I stood by the door for a long moment, looking at the tiny security camera he'd installed months ago. It had caught the worst night of my life. Now it was just a light, a symbol of the fact that I could protect myself too. Weeks passed. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since before John. My therapist said it was a sign of healing, but to me it was more like proof that I was still in there somewhere. One evening, while I was working on a canvas, Derek came over. He leaned against the doorway, watching me quietly. "That's new," he said, nodding to the painting. "A sunrise over a dark sea." "Yeah," I replied. I guess I needed to remind myself that light always comes back. He smiled. Not the flirty kind, not the charming kind, but the kind that told me he understood without me having to explain. For months, my life had been about survival. For the first time, I was starting to live again. Still, some nights the fear crept back. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. convinced I'd heard footsteps, or I'd freeze when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Derek never got frustrated. He just held my hand and said, "We check, we breathe, we move on." Slowly, I started believing that maybe I could move on, not just from John, but from the person he made me become. Then one morning I got a letter, no return address. My hands trembled as I opened it, half expecting the past to claw its way back through paper and ink. But it wasn't from John. It was from his mother. "I'm sorry," she wrote. "I didn't know what my son had done to you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you. The police told me what happened. Maybe now he'll finally get the help he needs." I stared at that letter for a long time. I didn't know how to feel. Angry, relieved, maybe both. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I didn't need an apology from anyone connected to him. The only forgiveness I needed was my own. That night, I sat on my balcony with Derek. We didn't talk much, just watched the city lights. He reached for my hand, and this time, I didn't pull away. "I think I'm finally breathing again," I said softly. He smiled. "Good, then you're really free." The day of the trial felt like the final page of a book I never meant to write. I didn't sleep the night before. My hands shook when I tried to put on makeup, and I could barely eat. Derek drove me there, one hand steady on the wheel, the other occasionally brushing against mine, not to hold, but to remind me that I wasn't alone. When we walked into the courthouse, I saw John for the first time in months. He looked smaller, not physically. He was still tall, still broad-shouldered, but something about him had changed. His arrogance had melted into something hollow, maybe fear, maybe the realization that control had finally slipped from his hands. He tried to catch my eye, but I didn't look at him. I didn't owe him that anymore. The prosecutor laid out everything: the stalking, the threats, the break-in, the digital harassment, the recordings from Derek's security cameras. When they played the footage of John trying to rip out the hidden camera, my stomach churned. It was proof of everything I'd been saying for years. But hearing it all out loud made it feel like I was reliving every moment again. My therapist had warned me about this. That justice doesn't always feel like peace. Sometimes it feels like reopening a wound so it can finally heal properly. When it was my turn to testify, my knees felt weak. I thought I'd freeze, but the second I started speaking, it all came pouring out. The nights I couldn't sleep, the fear of turning corners, the way I'd stopped recognizing myself in the mirror. The humiliation of trying to convince people that the charming, polite man they saw in public was a monster behind closed doors. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't sad, but because I had already cried enough for 10 lifetimes. John's defense attorney tried to paint him as emotionally unstable and deeply regretful. But even the judge didn't seem convinced. The sentence came down harder than anyone expected. 3 years in prison, mandatory counseling, and a long-term restraining order that kept him miles away from me even after release. As the gavel fell, something inside me loosened. It wasn't victory, it was release. When we walked out of the courtroom, the air hit me like sunlight after years underground. Derek didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me and smiled. "It's over," he said quietly. "Yeah," I whispered. "It's finally over." But what surprised me was what came after. The quiet. Not just the absence of fear, but the space it left behind. At first it felt strange, like I didn't know how to exist without looking over my shoulder. Then it started to feel like freedom. I started going out again. Brunch with coworkers, hikes on weekends, movie nights with friends I'd lost touch with. I even took up boxing lessons at Derek's gym. "It's not about fighting," he said. "It's about remembering that your body belongs to you." And he was right. Every punch I threw, every bead of sweat that hit the mat, it felt like reclaiming something John had stolen. One night after class, Derek handed me my water bottle with a grin. "You're getting good, Madison. Soon you'll be teaching me," I laughed, shaking my head. "Don't push it." Then he grew quiet. "You know, I never told you this, but when I met you, I didn't think you'd ever let anyone in again. I didn't blame you for it. I just hoped someday you'd realize you didn't need to hide." I looked at him then, really looked. The man who'd stood by me when I was at my lowest, who never tried to save me, just reminded me I could save myself. "Derek," I said softly, "I didn't fall for you because you protected me. I fell for you because you never made me feel broken." He smiled, and that same quiet, patient look from the first day we met crossed his face. From there, life didn't suddenly become perfect. Healing never happens in clean lines. Some days I still flinched at loud noises. Some nights I still double-checked the locks 3 times. But there were more good days than bad, and that was enough. A year later, I stood on the beach during sunset, barefoot, painting again. The waves were calm, the air smelled like salt and safety. Derek came up behind me and slipped his arms around my waist. "What are you painting this time?" he asked. "Not sure yet," I said, smiling. "Maybe something that feels like peace." He kissed my shoulder lightly. "Then I think you already found it." For the first time in years, I believed it. John didn't own my story anymore. Fear didn't either. I did, and that more than justice, more than revenge, was what healing really meant. Because in the end, freedom isn't just getting away from the person who hurt you. It's remembering who you were before they did.